Oh, hello.
Now
Hey,
we are, I think.
hello, YouTube. Hello, Facebook. This is July 21st, 26th. Oh my gosh. And you know how I love like this day in history?
Mhm.
I did a quick search, like this day in history, what happened? Whoa,
lot of
lots of
stuff.
things. Like, I mean, obviously lots of things happen, but lots of things that are relevant to, I think, our conversation, especially about World War II stuff in the military in the United States in the 1940s. So I want to, oh, there's Susan. Let's let Susan in, definitely for sure. So I want to go through quickly those 5 things, Sean.
Mhm.
And your job is to put me on a timer. Hello, Susan.
Okay. You get 1 minute per.
What do you think? 1 minute per?
It's up
1
to
minute.
you.
And then we could do a little gag about it if you want. How about that?
Do I have a script or am I supposed to just react?
Ad lib.
Ad lib.
Susan, hello. Good to see you.
Hi, I'm having trouble hearing you. I'm trying to adjust my sound here.
Okay, well, take your time. We're actually going to go. We're going to we're live on social media now. This is Sean. This is Ellie.
Hello.
And we let everybody in. We play our theme song, and then we'll do a little bit of nonsense, and then we'll get into our program. All right.
I'll go ahead and start the theme music.
Okay, very good. Good evening, everyone. Mary is back from her travels. Hey, good evening to everybody out there in viewership land. I'm Todd DiPastino. This is the Veterans Breakfast Club. I am in sweltering Pittsburgh. It's about 87, 88 degrees here on this summer, July 26th evening. And with me is Sean Hall, our Director of Programming. Hello, Sean.
Ahoy.
And we have Ellie DiPastino in Chicago with How Long Bay behind her. How you doing, Elle?
Doing well.
Very, very good. We are doing a show tonight focusing especially on the Korean War, but specifically the Korean War Armistice, which is an armistice, a ceasefire. And we have Susan Kee with us. I'm going to test to see whether she can hear me. Hello, Susan.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Susan is somebody I just met with. Do you pronounce it Key?
Yes, Key.
Key. Susan is somebody I just met. We talked over the phone a few days ago, and I'll introduce her more and she'll talk more. But she's an expert. She's a Korean American. She has devoted herself to honoring those who fell in the Korean War and those who served in Korea. And Susan, do you want to explain to everybody out there the difference between an armistice and a peace treaty?
A peace treaty, I think, is very different than an armistice because the armistice in the Korean War was signed just to create a ceasefire, to end the firing. It was not an end to the war. So the difference is the peace treaty would be an end to the war, whereas armistice is just an agreement on arms and ceasefire.
Yeah.
So technically, Korean War has not ended. We are still technically at war with North Korea.
Still technically at war with North Korea, all these many years later. And the armistice was signed on July 27th, 1953. And so this is the eve of the anniversary of the 68th anniversary.
Yes,
no,
68th.
68th anniversary.
Yes.
And so we thought we would do a program really focused around Korean War veterans, Korea, those who served there. And we have a program committee, and we meet every once in a while, and all of you are welcome to join it if you'd like. A program committee which advises us on how our programs are doing, how we can improve things. We had a meeting not too long ago, and one very strong suggestion was you need to do way more on Korea and the Korean War. And they were absolutely right. Talk about the forgotten war. more than any other, I think, that we fought, certainly in the 20th century, the Korean War is. And we are going to get to that in a minute, but I do want to make a couple of announcements. And first is about a program we have coming up tomorrow night, which is with this woman, Marta Cohen, who served in the French Resistance and then the French Army as a spy. She lived in France, and I believe it was Alsace in the eastern part of the country. Germany overran her country, took many of her family members to concentration camps who would die there. She came from a Jewish family, and because she spoke fluent German, and she felt she could pass as a German, she crossed over into Germany and served as a spy during World War II. She's now 99 years old. There's been a wonderful documentary just made about her, Chichenette, the Accidental Spy. We're going to screen the documentary tomorrow night. It's about a little less than 90 minutes, I'd say, probably 85 minutes. And then we're going to have Marta herself come and answer some questions and talk with us. So that is tomorrow night. You do have to register for it because we are going to be screening this documentary. Ellie will put the registration here in the Zoom side and on the Facebook side so that people could register for it if they'd like. And also a week from tonight for our VBC happy hour, we're going to be focusing on something that many of you know about. Certainly, I think if you served in the Navy in the past 50 years, you know about this. And that is the devastating disaster fire aboard the USS Forrestal in the Gulf of Tonkin. And that was on July 29th, 1967, 134 killed, 161 badly wounded. It started when an F-4 rocket accidentally fired aboard the ship, skipped across the deck, slammed into an A-10, which happened to be piloted by A-10 Skyhawk, piloted by John McCain, future Arizona senator, who would have to jump through the flames. The gas tank, the fuel tank on his ship, on his plane, exploded, and that detonated a 1,000-pound bomb, and it was just an absolute disaster, as you can imagine. We're going to talk with some Forrestal veterans, and also Sean with a Forrestal historian, correct?
Yes, really looking forward to him joining us. Harry Stewart, Commander Harry Stewart, wrote, I believe, a dissertation on the USS Forrestal. Reached out to him, and he's very excited to join us as well.
And I guess that, Sean, you know more about this than I do. The reason why pretty much anybody who served in the Navy would know about this is because this disaster really shaped future damage control and firefighting operations, right?
Yeah, everybody now has to take firefighting courses. I think every seaman, sailor knows how to fight fires because of this tragedy.
Okay. And so it's one that I think a lot of people in the Navy are familiar with, and we're looking forward to having some veterans. I think we're going to recruit more veterans of the USS Forrestal who were there and could tell us about it. That'll be a week from tonight, 7 p.m. for our VBC happy hour, Monday, August 2nd. Let me see, does anybody have anything else they want to announce, let people know about? Joe Daly. Joe, how do I forget Joe? How are you? Yes, I'm sorry I didn't write your name down on my agenda. Joe, it's good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Good to see you.
You're welcome.
I got
Which one? Which show?
Let's see here. I am going to go to your website, which is riverwalkingsticks.com.
Yes.
I'm going to share this with people because I got an email from Joe about this project, River Walking Sticks, and just thought it was a neat story, and he's doing good work. Joe, do you want to tell people about what you do?
Sure. I live in Columbus, Ohio. I live near the Scioto River, and I would go down to the river just to relax. I would look for walking sticks, and I would take them home and sand them. And one day on my way up from the riverbank, I had 4 sticks with me, and I saw a gentleman sitting on the bank, and we started talking about walking sticks and just a little bit about life. We chatted for about 45 minutes, and he was a disabled U.S. military veteran. He was living in his car down by the river. And I had a little bit of cash in my truck, and I gave it to him, which is, $32, roughly $34. And when I handed it to him, he almost seemed, a little embarrassed or ashamed. And on my way home, I really wanted to think about a way that I could give back to him. Well, first of all, let me go back a little bit. Once I gave him the money and we kind of had that awkward exchange, I said, how about you sand and varnish these walking sticks for me and I'll pay you for that. So he got a little smile on his face, and I came back a couple of days later and I picked them up and I paid him. So on my way home, I knew that was just very temporary for this veteran, and he would blow through the money, and he was still going to be homeless. So that's when I came up with river walking sticks, and we sell high-end walking sticks with custom military buttons that I'm finding on eBay, and we're embedding those into the walking sticks. And each stick comes with a little bio of the veteran. I have 3 veterans lined up. I'm working pretty heavily with one right now. We just launched 4 days ago. Things are going well. Here's some of the buttons. These are authentic military buttons that go in the top of the stick. So I have Army, Navy, Air Force. We have some of these flags here that go on the top. I have one right here. Let me grab it. So they just go right in the top of the stick.
Oh, yeah. Is there a name for that? What is the name for I get a cap. Is it a Walking King cap?
They're actual buttons that were on uniforms of soldiers.
Okay.
And then, like I said, each stick comes with a little bio of the veteran that worked on the stick. And we've also partnered with Faith Missions here in Columbus, which deals with homeless. There's over 70 homeless veterans in Ohio, 4 of which are women. So based on our sales, we give back to a portion of our sales goes to Faith Missions. And we've also partnered with SaveAWarrior.org. I'm not sure if you've heard of them. Amazing, amazing group of people. Jake is the founder, started from the trunk of his car in Malibu. They've helped over 1,500 veterans that were either contemplating suicide or suicidal. They do amazing work. So we've partnered with them, and we're going to give back to them. And we've just done this in an automated way that, we hope it makes a difference.
So, Joe, I take it you're not a veteran.
No, I'm not. No, I wanted to go in the Air Force, but I'm colorblind, and I made it about an hour with the first test, and I was out of there.
I'm not a veteran either, and neither is Sean, and neither is Ellie, and neither is Susan. And so I'm always fascinated by people like you and like Susan who have a heart for veterans and kind of want to find a way to serve them or just be with them.
Yeah.
What is it, do you think, about veterans that you find appealing or interesting?
What I find appealing is I don't think there's enough credit there. To be honest with you, I don't know that I could go out there in a battlefield with bullets, risk my life and never see my family and my kids. And I think it's something that is just amazing.
Yeah.
I don't think there's enough recognition there. And I think especially homeless, veterans, I think there should be more. I don't know if I just think there's not enough effort when it comes to that for the amount of sacrifice that they're willing to go through for myself and many other people. I think there should be more effort.
So you want to reach people, first of all, you want to reach veterans who might be interested in working for river walking sticks, and also let people know that the sticks are out there to buy if people want to get them, right? Yes.
Yeah, there's a spot on the website for any veterans that are looking for work. And the good thing is we can kind of cater to your needs. So if there's a veteran in a wheelchair in the area, within 30, 45 minutes to an hour, we can actually take them walking sticks and they can work on them. There's a lot of different aspects of the sticks. There's the footer we're going to personally engrave in the stick. There's the leather strap. There's boxing, packaging, billing. There's all kinds of things. So we can really cater. And if someone only wants to work 3 hours a week, that's fine. 10 hours a week, that's fine. So we're very flexible as far as that goes.
So they could get a hold of you by going to riverwalkingsticks.com.
Yes.
And they could also buy walking sticks from their website, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, you can order right online, select which button that you want to have embedded into the stick, and we'll ship them right to your house.
Joe, did you bring a vet here with you into this meeting tonight?
No, I did not. But interesting, the veteran that I hired through a friend through church, he was in the Gulf War Desert Storm, and his father was in the Korean War. And he's 86 years old. And I asked him if he would like to come to the program, but he said he's, up and down, and he's not really feeling that well right now. But
Right.
I thought that was interesting that his father was in the Korean War.
Well, Joe, thank you for coming on with us, and thank you for the work you do. If people have questions, they could raise their hand or just unmute themselves and ask it, or put the comment here in the chat if they want to chat with you as the program goes on.
Okay.
I want to invite you just to join us anytime you'd like.
Thank you.
And if you have anything new going on that you want to announce, please do feel free. Please stay in touch. This is a the great thing about the Veterans Breakfast Club, I mean, of course I think it's great, but the great thing I think about it is it brings veterans and non-veterans together. And
Yeah.
so please do, anytime you'd like to join us and talk about the work that you do join us.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for your service that's there. Served, I really appreciate it.
And I do want to highlight that I want to thank Joe Peterburs for joining us once again. Hello, Joe from California. He's he served World War II, Korea, Vietnam, all three, and as a pilot and air commander. And so Joe, we covered we had a program covering his World War II experience, which was unbelievable. And then and now we're gonna focus on the Korean experience. And I'm hoping also we have Chuck Nice. Chuck, are you there? Are you out there? Is that you, Chuck? Okay,
Yes,
you're labeled.
yeah.
You're labeled Robert. Good to see you, Chuck.
Thank you.
And we have Chuck Nice, who was in the first Cav, and we're going to have him share his story. But any other Ranger Brad? Yes, Ranger Brad. How are you, Ranger Brad?
I'm unmuted now. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And could you introduce yourself, Brad Berger, a National Park Service Ranger?
Yes, my name is Brad Berger, Air Force veteran. I was a cop in the Air Force. I joined National Mall Memorial Parks in 2002, spring of that year. Been there ever since, and Korean War Veterans Memorial is a great part of the experience of working at the National Mall.
So you're an Air Force veteran.
Yes, sir.
And what made you want to join the Air Force?
Patriotism.
But you could be a patriot in the Army or the Navy.
Well, the reason I chose the Air Force, to be totally honest with you, is because they were the only branch that didn't come after me. When I was in high school, every branch contacted me. And I went over to the recruiter, and I guess it was just teenage hubris or something. I don't know. I went into the Air Force recruiter and I said, well, I guess it's just a matter of time till I end up talking to you. And he leaned back in his chair and looked up at me and he said, we don't go to people, they come to us. And I'm not taking anything away from any other service, but it just kind of intrigued me the way that he kind of,
That's a good
sold the Air Force on me. So
it's a good. I saw Larry Kilmeyer clapping. Yeah, that's a good sales job. Play hard to get.
I love all the branches. I just wanted to be honest with you and tell you why I chose Air
I love
Force.
it, and that's why I love asking that question, because you usually get a good story. And you became a police officer in the Air Force. Do they call? This is how ignorant I am. Do they call them MPs in the Air Force?
Well, they have two different law enforcement branches. One's law enforcement. They call those LEs. And they are what you think of as a police officer, law and order on the base. And then they have security specialists, which I was, that dealt with other things that I'm not at liberty to talk about.
Oh, okay. Okay. And did you do that here in the United States, or did you go abroad for that?
Federal Republic of Germany.
Okay. All right. Germany.
So it was West Germany when I went there, and then I left and it was unified. So I joined at the end of President Reagan's second term and served through President Bush 41.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then you've been with the National Park Service for 19 years or so. And would you call your specialty the memorials, the mall memorials?
Yeah, National Mall Memorial Parks has two sectors. There's mall operations, which are the monuments and memorials that you generally think of: Washington Monument, Thomas Jefferson Memorial, of course, Korean War Veterans Memorial is part of that. And then there's another sector, which we call the Triad, which is the old post office tower, the Belmont Paul Women's National Equality Monument, and Ford's Theater National Historic Site.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about the Korean War Memorial, if you don't mind, and then I'll go to Susan, and then I want to go to our veterans. But if you could frame maybe what you think makes the memorial, the Korean War Memorial in Washington, D.C. special. And it's not one that you think of immediately when you think of the memorials in DC. You might think of the World War II and certainly the Vietnam Wall. But once again, Korea just kind of gets forgotten a bit.
Well, fortunately, that's not the case right now because it's undergoing some major work. Right. March of this year, we have a wall that's going to be going around the Pool of Remembrance at the end of the memorial next to where the American flag resides. And it's going to have the names of the fallen, which are going to be framed by linden trees around the edge of the pool and of the wall of names, including Republic of Korea volunteers, as well as United States troops that in the Korean War. Right now, as you look at this image right here that you pulled up, thank you, appreciate you doing that. You would not recognize the memorial right now. It's almost like a wrapped up Christmas present. If you visit the memorial right now, you can, for those of you who have visited the memorial, as you look at this image right here, of course, you know what I'm talking about. For those of you who might not have been to the memorial yet, that copse of trees on the right-hand side, there's a path that goes vertically that connects one end of the memorial where you see the people walking on the path here on the lower part to the path where the people are walking next to the larger wall. And that and the area where the wall is located are the only areas that you can actually walk into the memorial now. You're basically looking through a fence at the field of service, which contain the 19 stainless steel figures, which are moving uphill and toward the American flag. Uphill, obviously, because war is an uphill struggle, and reflective of the harsh topography of Korea, toward the goal of freedom, which they were fighting for the people of South Korea. Of course, the goal is embodied by the flag of the United States, Old Glory. So,
right. And when is that new part of the memorial to be unveiled?
Next summer.
Next summer.
Yes.
Maybe for the Armistice anniversary?
I haven't found any concrete date yet, but that definitely would be ideal.
Okay. And Susan, what's your view of the memorial in Washington, D.C.? I know that you're involved with the committee, I think.
Yes, actually, I was just there last week, and I did see all the wrapped up statues of the figures of the Korean War veterans trudging through the bushes there. And they are building the Wall of Remembrance, which will contain the list of over 36,574 Americans and 7,000 Katusas. Katusas are a Korean augmentation to the US Army. And so these were Korean soldiers that were attached and functioning with the US Army during the war. So about 7,000 of their names will also be on the wall. From what I understand from the Korean War Veterans Memorial Foundation, they are targeting July 27th, exactly a year from tomorrow, to dedicate that wall. So it is going to be such a significant memorial for all of our Gold Star families who lost their loved ones. Finally, their names will be recognized. And especially for the 8,000 families, or 8,000 were missing. So today there's 7,700 still missing, but during the war, 8,100 became missing. So for those families, they don't have a grave. They don't have a gravestone to mourn at. there's no place to go to honor their loved one's name. So this wall will be so significant for those families of MIAs. And next week, I'll actually be going back to DC and participate in the meeting that Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency holds. So this is an annual meeting of all families who are still missing their loved ones from the Korean War. So they gather every year to get a briefing from the Pentagon. And I go there every year to thank them and to acknowledge their pain and sacrifice they have made for me and all Koreans. So, so I know that this wall will be very meaningful, especially for the families of MIAs from the Korean War.
I thought for people who might not be familiar with the Korean War, I thought I'd give just a quick overview. It was a seesaw of a back and forth hellacious war for the first year when North Korea invaded South Korea on June 25th, 1950, poured over the south part of the peninsula. The country had been divided by agreement after World War II between the Soviet communist sector in the north and the US UN sector in the south. The US, President Harry Truman immediately decided to commit troops to this fight, even though most Americans didn't know where Korea was and didn't completely understand what was behind the war. Troops like Chuck Nice, who's with us tonight, landed at Pusan and began pushing the North Korean forces back up the peninsula, coupled with a very daring landing at Incheon in September of 1950. The war then went all the way back up to the China border and almost crossing into China, when China then entered the war in a devastating fashion and pushed the UN effort, or the American-led effort, back down the peninsula. Finally, the fighting settled about 1 year later after it started in 1950. Finally, it settled in about June 1951, right where it began over the 38th parallel. And it became much more of a static war for 2 years as peace talks began to try to end the fight. But over the course of this relatively short war, a little over 3 years, 5 million people killed. 5 million in 3 short years. 36,574, that's the number I have. It may not jibe with what you have, Susan or Brad. And then total personnel wounded in action, over 100,000. So this was a war, and Susan, you and I talked about this a little bit when we talked over the phone. It's the forgotten war. It's a war that isn't thought of immediately, isn't taught as often in schools. It's the veterans aren't recognized as much as even Vietnam veterans today. And part of that had to do with President Harry Truman and how he framed this conflict, correct?
Yes, he called it a police action. He didn't declare war in Congress, and he let UN take the lead in getting involved to help South Korea defend itself. And so eventually 21 United Nations got involved. So US, of course, was the biggest force fighting and leading the United Nations, but there were 16 other fighting countries and 5 other countries that sent medical help. So for a small country, there was a worldwide response. And yet in the United States, because we had just finished World War II and people were so tired of war, I imagine was some of the reasons why Truman did not want to declare war, because he didn't want to look like he had gotten the US into another war. So he called it a police action. And I think our Korean War veterans here, Mr. Peterburs and Mr. Nice will probably attest to the fact that that was a real injustice to the veterans who fought the war. It was every bit of a war. So many Americans died in that 3-year war, as you said. And so I think that was a real disservice by Truman calling it a police action or a conflict. You know, a lot of people call the Korean War as a conflict. It's not a conflict, it was a war.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm sorry to laugh, but yeah, when 5 million people get killed in a conflict, I think that's big enough to call it a war. Absolutely, and I agree. But at the same time, I think people have to know what Truman was facing. Truman was facing a country that was not excited about this war and was fearful that this little war in Korea would trigger the big one, World War III, with the Soviet Union. So he deliberately tamped down the expectations for it and kind of the, the war effort, the home front war effort behind it by calling it, as you say, a police action and a conflict. But man, what a disservice is right did that do to our veterans. I think of two anecdotes I could think of in the Veterans Breakfast Club over the years. We had remember a World War II veteran saying that there was a parade here in Pittsburgh when he was marched off to the train station to go off to war. And another Korean War veteran said they took them at 11 p.m. on a Monday night in the rain to the train station so that nobody would see them and so that there wouldn't be, a big reaction to it. And another, Paul Ibeck, who passed away maybe 6 months ago, he also served in the 1st Cavalry Division in the Korean War. He said he remembers distinctly coming home and people asking him kind of, where you been? And he said, Korea. And they said, oh, is that still going on? And then one of his friends said, you're lucky you were in Korea. We had a really bad snowstorm here in November. Boy, that must have hurt a lot. And let me ask, let me go to Joe Peterburs. Joe, thank you for joining us again.
Welcome.
How did you feel when you got recalled to go to Korea?
Oh, I wasn't recalled. I stayed in after World War II, but I did all administrative jobs from the time after World War II ended until November of 1950, when I was recalled. My older brother had just been killed in the big push on the 3rd of November 1950. He was in the 8th Cavalry. And so I was excited to get there. I wanted to.
You were excited to get there because of your brother, kind of avenge your brother?
Yeah, well, the whole thing. I just been, fighting the Nazis in World War II, and I was a professional soldier. I mean, I decided to stay in, and it was where the action was. And that's where I was going.
Right.
I arrived in December of 1950.
December of 1950, and I'm going to share my screen here so people could see. Be reminded, Joe flew this airplane P-51 in World War II. Wounded, shot down a jet, ME-262. Told that wonderful story at our taken prisoner. Told that wonderful story on our program, and comes home from World War II. And maybe, I guess, when I said, being recalled, what I'm doing, Joe, is I'm projecting how I might have felt about onto you, how I might have felt having survived one war, and here I am going to another. But this was, even though you were married, children yet at this time?
I had 2 children.
You had 2 children. What did your wife think about you going off to war?
Well, after World War II, we decided we were going to stay in, and that's what comes with being in the military. I mean, you do whatever the job is, and so she, she recognized that she didn't like the fact that I was going to her naturally, and she, she knew that was my job.
And, and I'm thinking about what Joe Daly said just a few moments ago, that, I think we don't often recognize the kind of sacrifices that veterans and military families make when they go to war. A wife and 2 children left at home, but you were eager to go because that's what you were trained to do. And here's another ignorant question. So they still had 2 P-51s flying in combat?
The thing is, well, you were talking about Truman and being, the country was not prepared to go to war. We had just finished World War II. There was a tremendous reduction of forces after World War II. And, I was a career soldier, so, but you talked about those who were recalled. Most of my compatriots were recalled. They were World War II officers that were in the reserve and the National Guard, and they were recalled. And many of them were very unhappy. They didn't particularly enjoy it, particularly we were given the P-51 to do one of the most difficult jobs in the Air Force. We were doing close air support, and the P-51 is just not an aircraft that's built in a small load, a couple of 500-pound bombs, rockets, or napalm, and that sort of thing, and it was very vulnerable.
So you're saying, I'm sorry, Joe. I think you're going a little bit in and out on my end here, but it sounds like you said that the P-51 was not quite built for the mission that it was assigned.
No, it was not a close air support type of aircraft. It was very vulnerable.
And
The P-50, I mean, the P-38 or the P-47 would have been perfect aircraft, but they were they just weren't available. We used what was available. See all the aircraft. See the one that I'm in the far lower corner. It's had its workout throughout World War II, and now we're using it in Korea as a completely different type of an aircraft, a close air support aircraft, rather than an air superiority aircraft.
so when you arrived in Korea in December 1950, I think you said?
December 1951.
December 1951, you hadn't flown a P-51 for 5
The day I
years.
was shot down. 10th of April, 1945, the last time I was in a P-51.
So last time you were in a P-51, you were shot down.
Yeah.
And there you are getting back up, going back
Yeah,
at it.
and I got about 5-6 hours in the P-51 and started flying combat.
Well, it's like riding a bike, Joe. I mean, come on.
Yeah, but I had never dropped a bomb, fired napalm, or fired or rockets. So I learned that all on my first mission.
You did. You learned it on the. It was on the job training.
Yes, it certainly was. Yeah.
Oh my! And so, what were these missions like?
Well, we had several different types of missions, but the most of them were that I flew were either interdiction targets against transportation, rail yards, railroads or highways and this sort of stuff, and rolling stock. And then there was another interdiction type where we hit supply depots and fixed artillery positions, this sort of thing. But the most deadly was, or the most satisfying was the ones that were close air support, where we did work supporting troops in contact. And many of my missions were troop, and those are the ones that I got some pretty bad damage on. So,
I was going to say, how many missions did you fly?
76 in Korea and 49 in World War II.
76 in Korea, 49 World War II.
Yeah.
Did you have close calls in Korea?
Oh yeah. I had a support of troops in the punch bowl, and I was coming off target, and there was a flash in front of me, and my aircraft just started vibrating like heck. We were stationed at Hang Song, which is about 50 miles away from the front line, and was the DMZ. And so I was about ready to bail out, but I thought I'll see if I could make it. So wait until I got down low. I was used to bailing out low. I bailed out at 300 feet in World War II. So I kept going. I kept going until I got back to base. I was able to get back to base. I landed, parked my parking space, and turned the engine off, and the props plop, 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 plop. And then one of the blades right in front of my face, and it's got a big hole in it, a 50 caliber right through the prop.
Is this what we're looking at right here?
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. And this was your lovely tent city that you lived in?
Yeah, that's our Main Street. Of course, all of you, of course, you guys from Korea know this is what it was like living in Korea, but it was tent city. And if you have, naturally, I'm sure you all watch Smash. Well, this is a carbon copy of what the situation is. And tent showers, big shower rooms. I mean, tank for holding the water and that sort of stuff. And then my most serious damage was on running against troops dug in along a mountain ridge, along trenches, and I had a flight of 4 with napalm and rockets. So I brought them into napalm, did a good napalm run, and they came around and fired the rockets. Of course, the 5-inch rockets, high velocity rockets. Then there was no, I mean, they went where your aircraft was pointed, and if you were in a slip or a slide or something, rockets, any which direction. So you had to be straight and level. So I popped off 2 rockets, got hits in the trenches, and then I got a small arms to come up through the wing route, and then bounced off the armor plate, and the cockpit sort of exploded, and I reached up and I looked down, and my hand was full of blood. So I didn't know how much damage it had done to me. And so my wingman had a radio failure, so I wobbled my wings. He came in and joined me, and so I let the element leader finish off the target. I went back to home base. I called him and I said, bleeding profusely, but I have no idea of how bad it is. So we get that back to the base, and my wingman pulls off in front of me, and he goes and lands, and all the meat wagons and fire engines, they follow him down the runway. So I come down and I land sort of nonchalantly and pull over to my parking lot space, and the crew chief jumps up on the wing, and I'm down in the cockpit, sort of getting my maps and stuff together. And I look up at him, and he slips and falls off the wing. Fortunately, he didn't hurt himself. But anyway, what happened was, of course, when the bullet went through the canopy, it splattered. I mean, it just blew up the canopy, and I got false plexiglass throughout. So, and it was a day or so of picking plexiglass out of my face, and then I flew again, and I fly to Michigan in 2 days. No big deal.
No big deal. Well, I guess after what happened to you in World War II, it was no big deal.
That's right.
By comparison.
Yeah.
This is such a hard question, Joe. And I'm not quite sure how to ask it or what I mean by it, but how did the sense of the war in Korea differ from World War II? I mean, was it a matter of scale for you? Was it I don't know, less dangerous, more uncomfortable? I mean, how do you compare World War II and
Well,
Korea?
it's impossible to compare. World War II was a world war that encompassed the entire globe.
Right.
Where Korea was a limited war, supposedly, but it was the first political war.
Yeah.
It was all politics. We weren't. I mean, it wasn't as bad as in Korea. I mean, in Vietnam, later, that was really bad.
Right.
Politicians were picking targets, that sort of stuff. But we were given restrictions that were unbelievable.
Right.
And I just, it was just disgusting. We were told that we do main supply routes, patrol the main supply route down to Bangkok John. And we were supposed to go down and check, there'd be convoys going down there, North Korean convoys. We'd go down, we'd have to check out, see if there's any weapons or heavy weapons in the convoy. But we were told if they were carrying a red flag, we weren't able to shoot at them. But what other flag would you be carrying? What other, flag would be fluttering off their truck windows? So anyway, that didn't prevent them from firing back. So after losing a couple of guys on that sort of a mission, I just stopped going down and to take a look at them. And then the Panmunjom, they restricted the Panmunjom area where we weren't allowed to go through it, even if your aircraft was damaged and everything else. No, you don't go through it. You report march if you go through that area.
You couldn't
So
go
we had
over
that
it.
sort of- What's that?
You couldn't go over Panmunjom.
No, absolutely not.
And here's a picture of the Panmunjom. They were, I think, when the negotiations began in the summer of 1951, they were in these tents, and then the tents were made more permanent. It was called originally the Peace Village, right on the 38th parallel, right in the demilitarized zone. And then I think this structure was then built hastily after 1951, and this is where the truce was actually signed. Here's the signing of the truce occurring on July 27th, 1953. And here's what it looks like today. That truce peace, building is still there as a museum in North Korea, but it's a much larger, more permanent entity today. So that was a sensitive area. You weren't allowed to fly over it.
Right.
Boy, thank you, Joe. And I do want to come back to you, but I want to go next to Chuck Nice. We want to hear his story, but I want to ask first, does anybody have any comments or questions? Anything they want to say about the war before we go to Chuck Nice? I want to welcome Henry Shepke. Henry, are you still here?
Yes, but I have to go in a minute.
Oh, you have to go in a minute. I'm glad I'm calling on you then. Henry, thank you for joining us. Henry is are you still 13 or do you have a birthday?
I'm still 13.
13 years old, Madison, Wisconsin. Great person, great kid. He loves to write to veterans, talk with veterans, collect autographs from veterans, loves history. And we're going to be doing a program. Henry doesn't even know that, but oh yes, he does know that because I told him we're going to be doing a program with Henry kind of hosting. But I see that you have a really interesting story here about an autograph that you collected from a Medal of Honor recipient from the Korean War. Henry, could you before you have to go, can you tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah, so his name is Hiroshi Miyamura, and he is a Korean War Medal of Honor recipient. So he signed the pictures that I sent him, and I also included like a questionnaire, so like some questions and stuff. And something that stood out to me in the questionnaire, I'd written, what's your proudest moment while in the service? And he said, because he's a Japanese American, and he said that his proudest moment was proving his loyalty to America, and that really stood out to me.
Oh,
yeah, that really
boy.
stood out to me.
How wonderful. Boy, Henry, you know so many interesting people. You've connected with so many interesting veterans to get their stories and autographs. I tip my hat to you, Henry. Thank you for joining us tonight, even while you can.
Yeah, thank you.
And Mary Klepper, I also want to welcome you back. I know Mary leads tours, and she's been leading tours out west around the country. You are back.
I'm back.
Good to see you.
You two guys too. I missed you all.
I know, we missed you too. You give tours, when you give tours in the DC area, you cover the Korean War Memorial, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
What do you usually talk about? What do you usually say when you show people the memorial?
So first of all, I don't want to use the word dumb down, but I have to do a very basic explanation of how we got into the war, because you never know who I'm going to have. I could have all 8th graders who couldn't find Korea on a map, or I could have people from all over the world who knew there was a war, but they don't know how we got into it and all this other stuff. So I do a very basic thing, but I talk about how brutal the weather was, but I do mention the deaths, and they're blown away. They have no idea it's that many people. You know, they have no idea.
No idea.
None. And I talk about, how when we walk through, and usually what I do is I walk them up where the names of the countries are that participated in the war, which if you look at it, you see France and you see these European countries that you think would just be decimated from World War II. And so you see these countries as you walk up. So I talk about that and their contributions. And then we look over to the soldiers and I say, now notice as we're walking, they're following you because they're keeping an eye. They're protecting the unit in that V formation. And you have to look at their eyes, how weary they are. Excuse me. How tired they are, the 1,000-yard stare. And then I point out the different branches of service, the weapons. I don't go into a lot of it because I couldn't tell you different guns from another, that doesn't matter. People are interested, they can look that stuff up. But then I get up to the very top, though, and we're looking down, and I say, now look down at your feet. And this is the best quote you will ever find in the city of Washington, D.C. And it's the one that, and I haven't done tours there in 2 years, of course, because of COVID, but basically it says they went to a country they never knew to defend a people they never met. And people kind of look at me and I said, think about it. You're a farm boy from Kansas. You've never met a Korean person in your life. You
literally couldn't find it on a map.
No, I mean, a 1950s farm boy from Kansas does not know a Korean. I mean, you just don't. Right. So I talk about that. And then as we go down the names of the walls or the faces on the wall, that's where I find it so incredibly moving. It's over because Vietnam is overwhelming, the sheer names on the wall, the stories you can tell about certain people that you either in your family or your town or just based Hawkeye, Yeah. And they laugh, but it makes it real to them, And then there is a figure that looks just like Alan Alda on the wall because he was a gunner in the Korean War, for real. Yeah. And of course, the MASH was a commentary on Vietnam at the time, but they just couldn't make it about Vietnam. But then you get down to, you see the integration of the black faces with the white faces because it was the first integrated war. And then you get to the military dog. And it's absolute, and you can see everybody's touch where the dog is because it's starting to wear away, but it's incredible to see their faces. And they're not all deceased during the war. I was just shot Ellie a Facebook post I made a few years ago. I had a group here from high school from New Jersey, I think. And I was telling them how these were real people. These are, isn't that beautiful? Look at her.
Oh, I love this photo.
I've never seen that before. That's so beautiful.
It is.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Oh my gosh. But, and I was telling the group that, I said, look at these faces and realize these are real people. Some of them died during the war, but not all of them did. Some of them, are probably still alive today. I've had a guy who came and found his face on the wall once. So I'm telling this to this teacher and he turns around and he's like, these are real people. He goes, I've never heard that before. And I said, yes, sir. And his name was Up, Mr. Up, we called him. I don't remember his whole last name. And he turned around and he was looking at his father. He had no idea his father was on that wall. And at first I was like, oh, bull crap. And then I got up there. I'm so cynical. And I got up there and I'm looking at the face and I'm looking at him and it is the exact same face. It was him. It was his father. And his father just died like 3 years before.
Wow. And
so the kids had brought roses or carnations to leave names on the Vietnam Wall and they all left them at their father. They put them in the wall for the father. It was beautiful. I mean, it was incredible.
Brad Berger, National Park Service Ranger, do people leave things at the Korean monument like they do at the Vietnam Wall?
You do. Vietnam Wall is, without a doubt, the biggest volume of offerings that are left. But there are things left behind at the Korean War and World War II memorials.
Yes.
So when we go to Washington, D.C., if we visit the Vietnam Wall, if we go to the World War II memorial, but if we skip the Korean War memorial, we're doing a disservice to ourselves. And
absolutely. I hate to say the word favorite for a war memorial. It's my favorite. I walk you through that. It's so beautiful. You can't help it. You can't.
And that reminds me, and I promise we're going to go to Chuck Nice next, but I'm looking at Burt Kennedy, who served in Korea, and Burt's background there, his what do you call the Zoom background? Virtual background is of our local Korean War Memorial here in Pittsburgh, and it's a beauty. We have a World War II memorial here in Pittsburgh. We have a Korean War memorial, a Vietnam memorial, but we also have a Korean War memorial. And it's often missed because you really have to want to go to it. It's on called our North Shore where the two stadiums are. Bert, could you tell us a little bit about that memorial?
Well, it was originally put up, I believe, in '99. Ed Stevens created the Korean War veterans of Western Pennsylvania. And then they started a fundraising, and they paid for that memorial themselves. And then when they built the new stadium, it was redone, and some plaques and things are added to it. And tomorrow we're going to be down there at 10 o'clock to have a service. We have a service every year. And we're going to honor Ed with a new plaque. His son's going to be down there. And
Excellent.
right now, we're finding that our Korean friends are cleaning the memorial almost once a week for us. The city of Pittsburgh doesn't do a very good job at it. And our fellows have, they're too, physically they can't do it anymore.
I have a great picture here of you. This is you, Bert, right?
Yeah. It's a girl from DC. She went to all the Korean memorials all around the country and was honoring the veterans.
How about that? How terrific. So you'll be down there at what time? Did you say 10 a.m. tomorrow?
10 o'clock is when we're going to start the service.
Okay.
We run about a half hour.
Okay. And I mean, but would you agree that it is really a special
Oh, definitely.
memorial with a lot of information there, like a lot I'm going to show another picture here so people can get a sense of it. Just as for people who live in Pittsburgh or who visit, it is worth a visit because it's just it's beautifully designed, well thought out. There's a lot to look at.
Todd,
Yes.
I've run past that memorial numerous occasions, and I really wish that there was something more to show what it is, because I actually honestly didn't know that was the Korean War Memorial here in Pittsburgh, and I think they should do a better job of highlighting it. It's a beautiful memorial.
And Bert, it's been a few years since I've been there,
Mhm.
but Bert, are there are names inscribed of local people here, maybe in Allegheny County, who were killed in the war?
Yes, there's two sections. One section is all the donors. That's where you'll see the white names on the black plaque. And then there's another section of the gold stars, which are all the people who were killed in Korea.
Now you have behind you now the two logos. One is Bedcheck Charlie, and that is the name of your newsletter, of your Korean War Veterans newsletter that you get out to people. I know I get it. Can you tell people what Bedcheck Charlie is?
Well, I think there was a Bedcheck Charlie in the Second World War also, but it was a North Korean plane that came over and dropped grenades.
At a kind of regular time.
Yeah.
You knew it was going to come.
Yeah,
It made a
in
regular
the dark
time.
when no one else could go up after him, I guess.
Right. And then over your left shoulder there is the Korean War Veterans Association logo. And you could see in Western Pennsylvania, it's called the General Matthew B. Ridgway chapter. And Ridgway is a Western Pennsylvanian, right?
Right. I think he lived in East Liberty or Oakland. And he's a pretty famous guy.
Yeah. Yeah, we're pretty proud of that. Thank you, Bert. And I have pictures of you also in Korea that I'd love to share.
Fox Chapel.
Oh,
he lived in Fox Chapel.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Bill. But he's not from there originally, though. Wasn't he from Fayette County?
Don't remember.
I think so. Who knows? I don't know.
The guy who used to be my boss served with him in Korea when he was a sergeant. And he went out to visit Ridgway at his house several years before he died. And he said, yeah, he was in Fox Chapel, not too far from me.
Hey, Todd.
Yes. Hey, Bob, how are you?
Never better. Yourself?
Good.
I agree with everything about this political war. It really put the guys who served there behind the eight ball. Ridgway was moved to Pittsburgh after he was the Army Chief of Staff, and the International School of Studies at University of Pittsburgh is named after him. So he was George C. Marshall was from Uniontown, Fayette County. Okay. It was the Marshall Plan, and he was Chief of Staff during World War II. So we got a lot of brass that runs around here, but Ridgway probably single-handedly turned that war around for the U.S. After Walton Walker got killed and the Chinese were attacking South. Ridgway rallied that army, and was able to push the communist forces back.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that, Bob? This is Bob Dvorak. He's an author, he's a historian, a retired journalist, still very busy. He is the official, I would say, I consider him the official historian of the 82nd Airborne Division. Bob, can you give us a little bit more context of that, of how he helped turn the war around, Matthew Ridgway?
Well, right. As I mentioned, the top general was Walton Walker, who was a World War II vet. He was killed in an accident right before Christmas in 1950. So now they got this leadership vacuum. The Chinese and the North Koreans are attacking South and everything's in disarray. MacArthur doesn't know where to turn, and Matthew Ridgway shows up, and maybe one of the best combat generals this country ever produced. And he just took it upon himself. He got out there with the troops and, what's wrong? What are we doing? Why can't we do this? Well, we don't have any gloves, and we don't have enough ammunition, and we don't have enough that. And he said, okay, we're going to fix all that right now. And he just instilled this spirit, this pride in the fighting forces. And he got the American troops off the roads, put them back up in the hills where the patrols were, and really had to do some really fundamental military work, infantry work to get that turned around. But he was definitely the guy who stabilized a really bad situation. There he is. Yeah, that was. He was 4-star then. He's the only general. He's the only man to serve both as the commander of the Southeast Asian forces and the European forces. So he was a NATO commander, and he was in charge of the Pacific Command too. He held both commands, and they had a nickname for him. He taped a grenade to his web gear with the pins pulled. And so he could just reach, and it was a live grenade. He could just reach off his web gear and toss a grenade. He was a soldier's soldier. There's no question about that.
Great stuff. Thank you, Bob. Oh man, this is such great
Oh,
stuff.
and I did want to mention, Todd,
Yeah.
in the course of the war, how unprepared the United States was to fight a war. The only real division that was probably combat ready at the time was the 82nd Airborne, but the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Pentagon had tabbed the Airborne as the only reserve combat outfit in the United States, because they thought with Korea going on, the Russians are going to get active in Europe again. So the 82nd Airborne was held as a reserve force during the Korean War, which maybe kind of tells you, it wasn't a total commitment. If you're not sending your best divisions or your best trained people, then what are you really doing? Are you just going through the motions?
Yep. You're fighting a war in Korea, and you're preparing for an even bigger one in Europe. I mean, that was
absolutely
that was this. Yeah.
If you remember the quote from Omar Bradley, and it was after they had some congressional hearings about it, and Bradley said that Korea would be the wrong war, the wrong time, the wrong place against the wrong enemy. Right. Because they really expected the Russians to hit them in Europe.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
Chuck, nice.
I really enjoy the program, and my hat's off to all the Korean War vets. A thankless job, and didn't get anything when they got home either. And very much a precursor for what was going to come in some of the other political wars we got involved in.
Very much a precursor. And I remember a veteran of Korea, Tom Smith, who came to our South Hills breakfast. I remember he stopped me coming in I said, "Hey, how you doing, Tom?" "Good." And he said, "Oh, I want to go talk to those Vietnam vets over there." And he said, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here now. I would not be around veterans in an organization, because when I got home from Korea, we were kind of shunned. We weren't accepted in the legions and the VFWs, and it was really the Vietnam veterans who experienced the same thing kind of brought us into their fold. And I'm very grateful to them. I love that story of paying tribute to the Vietnam vets. Chuck Nice, thank you for joining us tonight, Chuck. I want to let people know that Chuck Nice is hearing impaired. I met Chuck several weeks ago when I was giving a talk at where he lives at the residence at Bethel Park. And I met him and I was very struck by him and his story. Chuck served in the 1st Cavalry Division in Korea. He was among the first American troops mobilized for that war, sent to Pusan. Chuck, what was that war like for you? I'm going to ask you to unmute. Actually, before I ask you what was the war like, good, you're unmuted now. How did you get into the Army?
I volunteered for the Army.
Why in the world would you volunteer for the Army?
I can't answer that. I guess for the experience.
Well, you got the experience, I tell you.
Yes.
And
I'm proud that it's over, though. But yes.
And you arrived in Pusan. Is that where you arrived?
Yes. Yes.
What do you remember? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, I was I was a rifleman. I was Charlie Company, 5th Cavalry Regiment. When we first were there, when the war first started, they did not have enough troops there. And I was one of the first replacements. And even when I was there, it seemed that no matter what we did, we were outnumbered. And I remember one bad experience when there were just 7 of us left, along with Lieutenant Corson. And someone said, "Here comes their cleanup squad." And we saw the enemy approaching. I don't know how many there were, but it looked like the whole hillside were covered. And the next thing I knew, our lieutenant was talking to the sergeant. And I heard him say, "Sergeant, that's an order." And they come over and told us to leave your rifle and any ammo you have left. Our orders are that when he starts shooting, we're to take off. And so that's what we did. But what a brave man Lieutenant Corson was. Just imagine what he must have felt when he saw the enemy coming. He's all by himself, but yet he was determined that he was going to save the last of his men, and that's what he did. He was a really brave man, and I am so proud I got to serve with him. Thank you, Lieutenant Corson.
Here's a picture of Lieutenant Samuel Corson. My understanding is he had just joined your platoon a week or 2 earlier. He had not been there long. And he was pretty fresh from West Point, married with a baby, and had taken over this platoon that had been whittled down to 7 people. And you were one of those people, Chuck. I've read his Medal of Honor citation, and it says that he did exactly what you said. He essentially threw himself against the enemy, which had vastly outnumbered you, and ordered you all to escape because you were going to be overrun in moments. He sacrificed himself so that you could live. He was found, of course, dead afterwards. His remains were found, but they also found 7 North Koreans killed where he was. So he did some damage before he himself was killed. Here he is as a West Point graduate, a photo that I found. Here he is with his baby before he ships off to Korea. I was able to, after I met Chuck a couple weeks ago, I got very interested in Samuel Corson and his story. And I tracked this baby down to Austin, Texas, Samuel Corson Jr. And he's still around, and he's still alive, very proud of his father's legacy, never knew his father. This was the last time he ever saw his father. And he would be the one who would receive the Medal of Honor from Omar Bradley himself when Corson was awarded posthumously the Medal of Honor. This was Samuel Corson's wife. You can see how young she is. She's still alive. And unfortunately, Sam Jr. could not be here tonight. He very much wanted to be here and to talk to Chuck, but he's hiking in the Rocky Mountains, so he can't get internet access. When he comes back, he's going to get in touch with me. He wants to be on the program. He wants to talk to you, Chuck, and wants to talk about his father. So you could see, you could thank him for his father in person. You can see here is his tombstone at Arlington, Medal of Honor recipient, a real hero. So if you look him up, Samuel S. Corson Sr., Medal of Honor recipient for his heroic actions in saving Charles Nice's life. Charles, how old are you now?
How old are you,
Charles, how old are you?
91.
91. You got to live a life
91.
because of Sam Corson.
Didn't hear that.
Thank you, Chuck.
Oh, thank you for having me on the program. Thank you for what you're doing.
And one last thing, Chuck, I understand that you want to write Sam Corson's son a letter.
Yes,
What are you going to say in that letter?
yes, I wrote a letter to Sam. You should be so proud of your father.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Chuck.
Yes, thank you.
Boy, oh boy. What a story. I'm looking forward to having Samuel Corson Jr. on. Susan, can we hear a little bit more about your family's experience during the Korean War? I mean, obviously, this is personal to you. This is not, something you read about in a history book. This is something that you didn't personally live through because you're about my age, but your parents certainly did, correct?
Yes, I don't want to take up too much time. I don't know how you're running on time, but I'll tell you.
I'm good at interrupting. Don't worry.
Okay, well, I want to, especially for the benefit of our Korean War veterans like Mr. Nice and Mr. Petersburg and Mr. Kennedy, I want them to hear how grateful we are as a family and as a people. So I'll tell you briefly what happened with my father's family. So my father's family is from North Korea, Pyongyang, North Korea. And when Kim Il-sung took over in 1948, 2 years before the war, he started doing two horrific things, which is to take away private land from landowners, and then he killed Christians. Well, my father's family was a target of both. So my grandfather was a landowner, and he lost all his land. That's what communists do. They take all your land, and people own nothing. And then the other thing he started doing is kill Christians because he wanted to become God, the only God that people would bow down to and worship in communist North Korea. So what happened was my father's youngest brother was actually at a Presbyterian church for a prayer meeting. A lot of people don't know that before the Korean War, there were a lot of Presbyterian churches in North Korea. And that is thanks to American missionaries that had gone into North Korea in 1900. So my great-grandmother was the first Christian convert, actually. So we had already been 2 generations Christian when Kim Il-sung took over. So going back to my father's youngest brother was at a prayer meeting, and they were probably praying because all these communists were taking over the country and doing horrible things to people. Well, the red communists showed up, locked down the church, and burned it to the ground with everyone in it. And my uncle was in there, my dad's youngest brother. So systematically, the communists killed all the Christians this way in North Korea and annihilated the Christian faith and all the Christian churches that existed. So this was about 1948, 1949. That's when my father's family decided they better get out of hell. I mean, it was hell on earth. They had lost everything earthly, but they weren't going to lose their faith in God. So my grandfather hired guides for each of the children to be taken across the 38th parallel. And at that time, in 1949, the 38th parallel was not heavily fortified and mined like it is today. So they were able to get across the border and get down to South Korea. And he sent them one by one separately, because if they had all gone together and got captured, they would have been killed by the communists. So eventually all the children got down south. And my dad was probably about 17 at the time. My dad also fought in the Korean War. So he was about 17, 18 years old when the war started. And so he joined the South Korean army to fight against communism. And he was attached to American soldiers. So my father's family and my family absolutely understand the evils of communism. And what North Korea is today is still that same communist evil regime that oppresses people. And there is no freedoms to speak of for people in North Korea. So every day I am grateful that I was born in South Korea, where it was saved by people like Mr. Nice, Mr. Petersburgs, Mr. Kennedy, and this Lieutenant Corson. If not for these heroes, I would not have been born to a free South Korea. So a lot of people say this is the forgotten war. It is not forgotten to Koreans. We cannot forget the most traumatic thing that has happened to our country. And if not for America, South Korea would not exist today. I say this all the time. If America had not answered the call to defend a country they never heard of and a people they never met, I would not be sitting here and have this honor of laying my eyes on these Korean War heroes. They're not just veterans to me. You know, as I look at these Korean War veterans, Mr. Nice and Mr. Petersburgs and Mr. Kennedy, I'm looking at heroes. These are the heroes that saved my family. They're not just veterans to me. So that is in my heart. And that is what I thank God for every day, that I have a life here in America, that we have been saved as a country of South Korea and given this opportunity to not lose our freedom. So that is my dad's side of the family, their story. My mom has an interesting story that I think Mr. Petersburgs will enjoy hearing. My mom was actually about 9 years old, much younger than my dad. And they were leaving Seoul with all their, belongings packed in cloths, on their backs. They didn't have cars or anything. They were just pushing the carts. And she had her baby brother on a cart, her older sister, and they were on foot trying to get out of Seoul when the Chinese were coming down in January 51. She said one day she heard a buzzing of a plane overhead. She looked up and she saw an American star on that side of the plane. I believe it was probably a P-51 Mustang, because at that time, I think that's all that was used at the early part of the war. And when she saw that star on the side of the plane, she thought to herself, wow, the good people are here to save us. And when you're little, you think about bad guys and good guys. And she knew that Americans were the good guys that had come to save her and her family and her country. And for what? No reason. South Korea did not deserve that kind of help. We were not worthy as a country. We were not important. We were very poor. And the fact that so many countries answer the call, and especially Americans, sacrifice the most, is really humbling to us. And so that is a memory my mom still has of that day when she felt such a relief when she saw that American plane, that the good people had come to save her, and that she did not need to worry, that they were going to be saved. And so that's the story of my family, my mom and my dad. Obviously, they were saved because Americans were there to help fight for South Korea and defended it. So even though the war ended at the 38th parallel, right about where it began, I really think this is the forgotten victory. This is a victory because South Korea is prosperous today. It is one of the 10th largest economies in the world. And it is prosperous and free as a nation. And how could South Korea even exist today if our Korean War veterans and these heroes like Lieutenant Corson give their lives to save it? So to me, it is the forgotten victory. And so it is not a lost war. I don't like it when people say, well, that's a lost war. It is not a lost war because North Korea invaded South Korea and we defended it and we saved South Korea from communism.
Susan, you're exactly right. And that has become more and more apparent as the past few decades has gone on. You might, you know this far better than I do, but I remember this as a kid. Even as into the 1970s, South Korea was not, I can't say quite a basket case, but it was politically, there was a lot of political turmoil. It wasn't very developed. For a while in the 1960s, it looked like North Korea was going to be an industrial powerhouse. That absolutely didn't last. And as South Korea has gotten more prosperous, more democratic, more stable, it's become so clear that the Korean War was really a great success. The Korean War succeeded in planting the seed of this really vibrant, powerful Asian democracy called South Korea.
Absolutely. The fact that I'm here, in fact, that any Korean lives in freedom is the legacy of our Korean War veterans. You
So-
give us freedom, and we would not be free otherwise.
Susan, you told me you quit your job in corporate America really to devote yourself to this project. And I do want to share the link to the project so that people could kind of know about it and follow you on Facebook. A lot of what you do here, what you do with this project, honoring Korean War veterans, is here on this Facebook page. Do you want to let people know kind of why you decided to dedicate yourself to honoring them?
Well, it wasn't my idea. It was God's idea. I was working in corporate world as a project manager in IT for about 20 some years, and I really got corporate burnout, and I didn't really see a lot of fulfillment or meaning to my job. I mean, yeah, I made money, but that's not it. It didn't make me happy. So I walked out of my job. I just had it with corporate burnout and corporate politics. And I started praying. I just asked God, what do? I want to do something more fulfilling, something meaningful for others. And I just prayed about it. And at the end of my soul searching, I realized God was telling me, do something about what you're most grateful for. I'm most grateful that I'm alive and free. And the fact that I'm alive and free is because of our Korean War veterans. And I thought, wow, I've lived my life some 40 years in America since I was 9 years old. And I had never acknowledged or looked for Korean War veterans to thank. So I thought, I've got to find them. So I started calling Korean War veterans chapters here in Arizona, where I live, Korean War Veterans Association chapters. And I went to my very first meeting in 2012. And I have to tell you, I was just so emotional. I think I just cried when I was in front of the veterans, because I realized, wow, they're in their 80s now. This was 9 years ago. They were in their 80s. And I realized I had lived my life so selfishly, just trying to live the American dream, pursue and get what I can from the opportunities America gave me, without thinking about what America gave me already that I need to give back for. And so I realized when I met Korean War veterans that this is really my life mission, that I need to give back by thanking and honoring our Korean War veterans, by teaching America about the Korean War and why it mattered, and the great legacy of freedom that our Korean War veterans gave to our Korean Americans and South Korea as well. So I felt, as a Korean person who was saved by these heroes, that I need to be the biggest voice of thanking and honoring our Korean War veterans and thanking America. So this was all an idea that God put in my heart to do. So I started this Facebook page where I post Korean War history. I do interviews with Korean War veterans. I recently posted one of the events that I had the honor of participating in, which was a military honors funeral at Arlington for a Korean War MIA who was recovered from when Trump met with Kim in Singapore in 2018. And this soldier, Major Harvey Storms, was killed at Battle of Chosun Reservoir, U.S. Army, 7th Infantry Division. And I know the family, and so I went to the military honors funeral and I posted about what this meant. So as a Korean person, this is not just history to me. This is my life. I have my life, I have my freedoms because of these veterans. It is a very real sacrifice that these veterans made to give me, somebody they didn't even know, a life and a freedom. And I think that is what truly makes America great. And America, more than any other country in the world, has done this over and over, where they have gone to fight and die for another people to defend their freedoms. And for that, I will always be grateful and forever grateful.
Boy, oh boy, what a powerful ambassador you are, Susan. Thank you. I wanted to ask Ken Kazak, you have a good question. Would you mind asking it here to the group?
Yes. And by the way, Susan was worried about taking up too much time. That was emotional. That was phenomenal. So anyway, Susan or Chuck, do you know, does South Korea still host Korean War veterans or first generation descendants?
Yes, so the Korean government has a ministry called Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs, and they have invited Korean War veterans to come for a revisit, to be thanked and honored for their service and to see the country that they have helped save now prospers incredibly. So I actually went with a group of Korean War veterans back in 2013. I went with Gold Star families of the Korean War in 2018. Now, I understand that MPVA is stopping this program because our veterans are too old to travel. You know, our veterans are now in their 90s, like Mr. Nice is 91. I'm sure Mr. Petersburg may be around the same age. So because of the health risk and the safety risk of our veterans being so old, I don't think they're going to continue it. But I do know that they do have this program for Gold Star families of MIAs and KIAs, missing in action and killed in action. And also they have something called Peace Camp for grandchildren of Korean War veterans. These have to be college-age students who are descendants of Korean War veterans, and they do a week-long program where they learn about the Korean War. They go to various areas like the DMZ, the Korean War Memorial. So there's a lot of things that the Korean government continues to do to show gratitude, and also to make sure that Americans know that we're grateful and that we are grateful to the very heroes who came to save us some 70 years ago.
Yep,
So thank you for that question. They do a wonderful job in Korea honoring our veterans.
Mark Spiridigliosi, you said that you served in Korea after you served in Vietnam, correct?
Yeah, that's right, Todd.
And what Susan is saying is kind of resonates with what you heard even back then.
Yes, Susan, your passion brought tears to my eyes. That's the heart of Korea there that you believe shows that. So sorry about that. But yes, and being there post armistice and being there when there wasn't any war going on, I was doing the glory of running a mail truck out of Munsan down to Kimpo Air Base. But as you met the people there, I don't think I met one person in all of the time I was there in June of 1970 through June of 1971 that was, any different than what Susan's passion is. So thank you for remembering what they've done for you there.
Well,
and
thank you,
you, Chuck, and thank you, Joe, and thank you all of you guys sitting around there.
Well, I'm so honored to meet you, Mark. I know you're a Korea defense veteran who served after the war. And I just want the audience to know there has been 3 million American men and women who have served in Korea after the war to the present. So this is why I'm so grateful to America. There is no greater ally, no greater defender of South Korea than America has been. Over 70 years, they're still there today, helping defend South Korea. So my heartfelt gratitude to you, Mr. Mark. You are definitely among my heroes who have continued to preserve the freedoms our Korean War veterans fought to save.
Thank you. And you taught me a love of kimchi too. Or your parents did.
Pat Hughes, you served in Korea also after Vietnam.
Yes, Todd, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah, I love the Korean people. I never met a bulgogi and rice and a OB beer I didn't like in Korea. Those wonderful people. I served there in 1972 and 73, and then I went back with my employer, Saudi Aramco, to hold a board meeting in Seoul, Korea. And I was struck how much progress has been made since I was there in 73. I just couldn't believe what I saw. It's a wonderful, wonderful country.
Yeah.
And I had a great time.
I was thinking of Larry Guggen's, I think it was with Rico Rodriguez, a fighter pilot, who said, I think it was him who said that he was with you in Korea, and he was getting a visa to go out of the country, a line of 100 people standing in line, and there was an older woman, a Korean woman, who saw that he was a serviceman way back there. She was at the front of the line. She came back and grabbed him and pulled him to the front and took his place, waiting 100 people. Wasn't it Rico who told that story?
I believe so, Todd. Yes. I didn't have such a story, but I lived in Korea for 2 years, 1984 to 86, actually on base at Osan. And I can, Susan, I can share that I love the Koreans. They were so respectful of Americans. And for those who fly airplanes, if you fly over someone's house at 50 feet and make a lot of noise, they're going to call the news and complain. If you fly over Korea, any part of Korea at 50 feet, they wave to you and gives a thumbs up. And that was in 1985. They loved it. And I'll tell you, I went off base quite a bit. I felt safer in Korea than any place I've ever been. The Koreans would not let anyone hurt an American, especially American GI. I'll go back there in a heartbeat. I hope it never occurs again. I'll fight for the South Koreans anytime. And I bet everybody that's been there will. They are a tremendous people. I love them all.
Thank you,
Well,
Larry.
we wouldn't be here without America. And in the end, it's really Americans that are the great people, in my mind.
I did spend some time with some Korean pilots. I will tell you that I did eat kimchi that was made at home, and it's not too bad. But I'm going to tell you also, I'm not going back to get some. It wasn't that good. But no, wonderful food, wonderful people.
It's an acquired taste. It is an
acquired taste. And by the way, I still kept in touch with a Korean airline pilot for many, many years until he passed away. All right. Thanks, Todd.
How great. This is such an education. What a wonderful night. Susan, I cannot thank you enough for coming. You may see some heroes here, but you have a room full of fans right here. I can tell you that. I mean, oh my gosh.
Wow, this has been such an honor for me. I always feel so humbled because how do I, if not for the grace of God, see the faces of heroes who saved my family? And so every time I see a Korean War veteran's face, I'm so grateful for that blessing. How do I come to know these heroes and meet them 70 years later? And so I will forever be grateful to all of you who have served in Korea and who have saved us. We would not be here otherwise.
Well, Susan, I'm grateful to you for joining us, and I will be in touch with you. I want you to join us again. Anytime that for any Korean anniversary or anytime you want to join us, would love to have you. Your energy and spirit has just really propelled us through the evening. I'm grateful for it. Chuck Nice, thank you so much. I know it's not easy for you to join us, and I'm grateful to you and to Bob Young for getting you here on the program. Joe Peterburs, thank you for joining us for the second time. When we do Vietnam, we'll have to recall you for Vietnam. How about that?
Okay.
My pleasure.
And all the rest of you, Bert Kennedy and Ranger Brad, thank you, Ranger Brad, for joining us. I'm so great. You're all welcome to come back anytime. This has been a wonderful educational night. I hope to see many of you tomorrow night with Mart Cohn. Oh, kimchi, Pat Hughes. You liked it, obviously, huh? Yeah.
Love it.
See? Send a jar of that to Larry. Larry's got to get back on the kimchi wagon, I think. Thank you, Pat. Hey, hope to see you tomorrow night with Mart Cohn, 99-year-old accidental spy. And next Monday, week from tonight, we are doing the USS Forrestal. I do expect especially Navy vets to join us. I know there was some chat in here, Larry Kilmeyer, Chad Riddle. Larry, what is that book that you're holding up, Larry Kilmeyer?
That's the book that my cousin Kenneth Kilmeyer wrote. He grew up in Plumboro, lives in Virginia. Fire, fire, fire on the flight deck aft. This is not a drill.
He's your cousin?
My first cousin, yes. I talked to him, or I texted him today about next Monday's show.
Sean, did you know that?
I did not know that. I've talked with Ken as well. I thought
know Ken Kilmeyer. I didn't know he was related to you.
First cousins.
Whoa.
You get Ken on next week.
He turned us down. You tell your
Well-
cousin he turned us down.
Yeah, he said that he thinks it's in good hands with the fellow we're going to have on. He's the navigator. He was the navigator the day of the fire. But this is I call it the unabridged history of that fire. So it's the ship's logs put in chronological order of that day.
And he's going to join us.
Well, I'm hoping. I mentioned it to him,
Oh.
and I mentioned it to my brother Tom, who's also a Navy veteran. He's in South Carolina. I'm hoping that both of them will join myself for next Monday.
Twist his arm. Come on, Larry. Twist his arm. Come on,
I'll be making phone calls to get them on here. But
All right.
yeah. So I'm there. It is.
Oh, that's great. That'd be great to have him. Thank you. Thank you, Larry.
You're welcome.
Thank you all. Good
God
night,
bless all.
everybody.